Hey, welcome back to Formulator effects. Today we're going to dive into something really cool. We're actually going to take an existing video /Ninimo turns into Bumblebee.mp4 and push its audio way beyond what it normally sounds like. If you've ever watched logo edits or heard those distorted voices or those really strange, almost mechanical effects, and wondered how people actually make that kind of audio, this is where we get into it, because a lot of those sounds come from something called Formulator. It's an older audio plugin originally developed by Richard Wolton, and even though it's been around for a while, it's still used pretty heavily in certain communities, especially in logo editing. And the reason is, it does a lot more than most standard effects. It's not just adding something on top of your audio, it's actually reshaping it underneath. So instead of just, adding reverb or echo, you're working with filters, pitch shifting, modulation, sequencing, all these different components that can completely change how something sounds. And depending on how you combine those, you can get results that are really clean and controlled, or just completely chaotic. Sometimes it sounds robotic, sometimes it sounds distorted, sometimes it barely even sounds like the original audio anymore. And that's kind of what makes it interesting, because there isn't just one way to use it. There are tons of variations, tons of different setups, and even small changes in the settings can completely change the final result. You might adjust one parameter, and suddenly the whole sound shifts. So on this channel, we're going to spend time actually exploring that. Not just showing effects, but breaking them down. You'll see videos where I recreate specific sounds, others where I go step by step through how something works, and somewhere it's just experimenting, trying different combinations, pushing things a little further, and seeing what happens. Because honestly, a lot of the more interesting effects come from just messing around with it. Like, you start with something simple, and then you layer a few things together, values, and suddenly it turns into something completely different. And once you start to understand what each part is doing, it gets a lot easier to control that process. That's really the goal here, not just copying settings, but actually understanding why they work. So instead of just saying, use this preset, we'll look at things like how filters shape the tone, how modulation adds movement, and how different layers interact with each other. Because when you understand those pieces, you can start building your own effects from scratch. And that's where it gets a lot more interesting. Now, let's get into the video we're going to use today. It's called /Ninimo turns into Bumblebee.mp4. I'm not entirely sure what Ninimo is, but it looks like some kind of cartoon character, maybe a yellow cat-like thing, and it seems to be turning into Bumblebee from Transformers, which is pretty cool. Anyway, we're going to apply Formulator effects to this video and see what happens. Keep in mind that these effects are going to distort the audio and possibly change colors or pitch. It's not always predictable, but that's also what makes it fun. So, let's get started. The first step is to open up the Formulator plugin and create a new instance. I'll be using this plugin on a separate track in my DAW, which is just Adobe Audition for me. But you can use whatever digital audio workstation you prefer. Once I've got the plugin open, I'm going to start by applying some basic effects to get a feel for how it works. I'll add a bit of reverb and echo to give it that extra spacey sound, which is actually really cool when used in conjunction with other effects. Next, I'll add a filter to change the tone of the audio. Now, this is where things start to get more interesting, because not only can you change the pitch, but you can also alter the tone and timbre. So, for example, if I want Ninimo's voice to sound more robotic, I can use a low-pass filter to remove some of the higher frequencies. But what if I want it to sound more like Bumblebee? Well, that's where modulation comes in. Modulation is basically just a fancy way of saying changing values over time. So, if I apply a modulator to the pitch or tone of Ninimo's voice, it will start changing its sound in real time. Now, let's talk about sequencing. Sequencing is like a built-in song structure that you can apply to your audio effects. It allows you to create complex patterns and rhythms using just the plugin itself. So, if I want Ninimo's transformation into Bumblebee to have a specific pattern or beat, I can use the sequencer to create it. One of the coolest things about Formulator is that it allows you to layer multiple effects together. This